Welcome to the Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast, all about constructing your career in neurology. I'm your host, Sara Schaefer from the Yale School of Medicine. Today we will be speaking about the art of saying no with Brenda Banwell, Chief of Child Neurology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and Professor at University of Pennsylvania, and Zach London, Neurology Residency Program Director at the University of Michigan. Thank you for joining us, Zach and Brenda.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us, Sarah. Great to be back.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to our Letters of Recommendation episode, Zach is making his reprise today, and that was a very good episode for anybody who hasn't heard it yet. So diving in, you're both pretty successful people, and I imagine you got there by saying yes to a lot of things. But today we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about saying no and how to be purposeful about when you say yes and no and what you say yes and no to. I know that many new faculty find themselves saying yes to everything. What were your experiences early in your career? Zach?
Well, I definitely was one of those people. I was sort of afraid to say no to anything, but I think a big part of it wasn't necessarily that I was afraid of protecting myself. It's that I actually didn't really know what I wanted entirely yet. I think that's not an uncommon issue for new faculty. I wasn't sure what I liked yet. I wasn't sure which direction my career was heading. So I think to some degree, I probably overcommitted as a form of exploration as much as anything else. But I think that's why mentors are so important, because I had some mentors and I had a chair who I think was very cognizant of this and tried to be mindful about what things he thought would be helpful for me. And I think that actually helped shape a lot of those decisions for me, which was great.
And Brenda, what was your experience at the beginning?
So my experience at the beginning and still now has been, I'm definitely more of a yes person than a no person, as anyone who knows me would tell you. But my advice to people would be to think about the places where you're saying yes and the wonderful relationships, collaborations, and opportunities those yeses lead to. And that, again, is where a good mentor comes in. But, part of the things I said yes to was joining international collaborative groups, where initially I was just the silent learner and eventually have been able to grow into being a leader. But those groups framed many of my most rewarding friendships and professional relationships. I said yes to leadership opportunities for parent groups and patient groups. And that gave me a lot of in-depth understanding of the patients I served from a different lens. And then finally, I said yes to opportunities provided to me by people I greatly admired. And that was a responsibility to do that well, but it also really, I think, cemented some of the mentorship relationships that I have benefited from.
So both of you at least started off and maybe continued to say yes to most things. Zach, for you, as the former yes to everything person, what made you change the way that you decide about saying yes and no? And how did you learn to decide what to say no to?
I think I realized early on that there were things that were, I guess I would say, sort of low visibility activities that were sort of siloed and were not things that I enjoyed. And those were the things that I was sort of first to say no to. I think when I'm talking about like departmental or institutional administrative tasks that are things like scheduling lecture series or helping create order sets for Epic, stuff like that, which some people love that stuff. And for me, that was like busy work that nobody even really knew I was doing it unless I wrote it on my CV. And I think those were the first things to go, or the first things that I tried to divest myself of when I got far along in my career so that I could.
And Brenda, you talked a little bit about the things you say yes to. How did you learn what to say no to? So
not dramatically different. I started thinking about things that either weren't rewarding, either because I didn't feel I was the right person to do what I was being asked to do. And sometimes that's about leadership. It's about recognizing that there's someone else for whom this opportunity would be great for their career. And for you, it isn't. And so as I became better known in my field, for example, I would be asked sometimes to do things, give talks in different places, lead symposia. And I've done that. And I've had that wonderful opportunity. My CV doesn't need that. And so, but my mentees do. And people that are earlier in their career need those opportunities. So the easiest thing to say no to for me was opportunities that on paper look great, but I've had those opportunities and others haven't yet had them. So saying, you know, I've got a great expert, this person would do a wonderful job, and you don't need it to be me. In this particular case was one of the fun things to say no to, because I was enabling people to do the work that they needed to do and wanted to do. Second, when I really knew I couldn't do it well. So for example, in the midst of budget season right now, I can't add myself to search committees and expect to do an honorable job of vetting candidates and doing all that work. And again, it's good citizenship work to be part of those committees as a leader. But in the middle of a busy season, I just won't have the time to do that well. So I think one of the things I learned is to say no to things when your best effort isn't going to be possible, because then you're not giving what they expect from you and what you would normally deliver if it was a different time of year. So I could say lots of other things, but those two things I think were pivotal. One, get out of the way. If somebody else should have that opportunity, be a leader by not being the visible leader. And then second, if you can't do it well, be honest about that and tell people, I can't give the time to this that you need from me. You should choose someone else.
So that's a great plug for an upcoming episode that we have planned on mentorship and how to be a good mentor. But yeah, I think a lot of my own experience has been that if you say yes to too many things, you're unable to do all of them well. And it's important, if you're trying to get your foot in the door and trying to get your name out there, that the things that you do say yes to, that you really are fully committed to. I hope we'll talk more about that. But segueing into the approach that you might have to things to say yes or no to, Zach, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here because I follow you on Twitter, and I invited you on this particular podcast because you posted a wonderful little algorithm about what to say yes to and what to say no to, and how to approach those in a very easy way with 3 questions that you should ask yourself. So I hope that you can tell our listeners what that algorithm is.
Sure. And this is certainly nothing groundbreaking. I mean, this is probably, when I say it, going to sound incredibly obvious, but I think that sometimes it's helpful to have an obvious framework. So the 3 questions, number 1 is just, is this something I enjoy? Is this something I want to do? Basically, is this something I would do if there was no specific reward for it? Because I think there are things like that we just love, right? So hold on to that in your minds. Second question, which is probably the hardest one to answer, is this something that's actually going to help further my career goals? And so for some people, furthering my career goals is very specifically working towards a promotion or something like that. For some people, it's just getting in good graces with colleagues or bosses or clients or somebody else. But I think deciding what your career goals are is fundamentally important, because otherwise you can't answer that question. And then the third question is just, is it easy? Is this something that's going to take a lot of time? Is this going to take a lot of emotional investment? And, if you can answer yes to 2 of those 3 questions, I would say do it, right? So let me just kind of walk through, like, if it's something that you like doing and it's easy, but doesn't really help your career, do it anyway. You like it. It's easy, right? And if it's something that you really like, that you enjoy, and you can convince yourself that it actually is a good career move for you, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. Like, these are the actual opportunities. These are the reasons why we find fulfillment in our jobs, the stuff that we work hard for, but has enjoyment for us and has, positive benefits for our career. And then I think the third one is, like, you don't really like it, but it's good for your career and it's easy. Just bite the bullet and do it, right? It'll be over quickly. And those are, you got to say yes to 2 of them. But I find that a lot of people find themselves in a situation where they think something is good for their career, but it's hard and they don't like it. And I think that is a recipe for burnout. That is the yeses that people say, or opportunities people say yes to too often. And then, of course, there are times when it's not good for your career, you don't like it, and it's hard, and you still say yes to it. And that's just a complete waste of everyone's time. And so those are the ones you really, really got to learn to avoid.
This really resonated with me. And I think that I was subconsciously doing this without thinking through the questions in an organized way. But I think this is going to be so helpful for our listeners. What do you think about that, Brenda? Do you have a formal approach, or do you think you do that subconsciously like I do?
So I love the approach because I think it does a couple of things that we all need to do, and we need to keep redoing because they don't stay static. So one is, what am I actually enjoying now in my career? And was that the same thing I enjoyed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 months ago? It shifts. And it's okay to shift because we're maturing and growing and developing new interests. So I think intermittent personal reappraisal of what brings us professional joy is a really good idea. And that will help make sure you don't say yes to things that you used to enjoy, but you've done already. And you're ready to move on to new things. So I think that's one great step. The second, is it good for my career? I love that one because I think a lot of people don't actually know. And what I mean by that is that it's not always so obvious where you want to go. And it really, again, comes back to the mentorship conversation, to walk through with people, what are your career aspirations? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Not tomorrow, but 5 years from now. What do you look back 5 years from now and say, this is where I had hoped I'd be? And that's a really good conversation to have, and it'll help with what Zach is saying. And then the easy versus hard part. I like that one, although I would personally reframe it a little for me. Some of the most rewarding and fun things I've done in my entire career have been really hard. I've put my heart and soul into them. I've had to work really hard, and I come out the other side a better researcher, a better clinician, better leader. So don't shy away from hard. But if you're going to take hard, what are you giving up? Because unless you can tell me that you have 20 or 30% of your day completely unbooked and you're sitting about having tea thinking I have nothing to do, that's not the reality of most of us. I'm sure it's not the reality of any of us.
Where are those people?
I don't have any of them on my staff. I've never been one. So if you're going to take on one of those great opportunities that is truly hard, mentally hard, you're going to have to think hard, push your intellectual envelope, if you will, and it's going to take time. Be honest with yourself and say, what am I giving up? And this is where burnout comes in. If what you're giving up is every Saturday morning from 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, then you need to be honest about that. And you need to talk to your partner. If you have a partner, you need to talk to your children. And you need to say, I've just taken on this great opportunity, but I'm not going to be free on Saturdays anymore. Because otherwise you do that, but you haven't been honest that you're going to do it. And then you're burned out and stressed and frazzled, and your home life is not ideal. Or you go to your leader or your division chief or your chair, and you say, I have this amazing opportunity, but it's going to take me 5 hours a week or 6 hours a week to do it. What can I remove for a while so that I can do this well without taking up every weekend in my life? And I don't think people advocate for that for themselves well enough. And I think as leaders, we need to be open to people coming to us with those opportunities and thinking about how we can actually support that. Because otherwise it's nights, weekends, or not done to the best of your ability. And none of that is actually academic or personal professional advancement.
So true. So say we have decided to say no to something. Are there better or worse ways to actually say no? People may feel compelled to give an excuse. Is that necessary? Do you have some tips on that, Brenda?
Absolutely. So the first thing is never knee-jerk say no. That doesn't respect the person who asked you to do it. I always say to them, that's an interesting opportunity. I'm going to reflect on that, and I will get back to you tomorrow or Monday or whatever's the appropriate amount of time. Because, for most things, silly stuff that is clearly not an issue, you can always say no to quickly. But the vast majority of things that we get asked that we say no to, we should at least give 24 hours of response to. First of all, it's respectful. And second of all, you can actually think through it and say, am I saying no too quickly, or is this something I really need to back off from? Or framing how you want to say no. So no matter how you do it, I take a little time to do it well. So, most of the time, that's good advice. And then when you do say no, look at why they asked you. What are they really looking for? Is this, for example, a symposium that one of your mentees is chair of, and they want to show their colleagues that their former mentor still respects them and wants to work with them, and they, really excited for you to be the speaker? That's something you might actually revisit and say, well, I didn't plan on doing that, but I can support that. Or, that might not be the moment to nominate another speaker, because for that person, they're asking you because it's their relationship with you that's so important to them. On the other hand, this also could be the opportunity I mentioned before where you nominate someone else. So I think as you frame the answer, just always taking a moment to look at who asked you and why were you their choice, so that if you say no, you can reframe it in a way, really honored, it would be a great opportunity, can't do it because of this, or give them an alternative person. And it's very clear that you gave some thought to your response.
Those are really good ways to approach this. And I don't have much to add other than to say, if we look at this from the perspective of someone who's very earlier in their career, a lot of the opportunities that come to new faculty are not as specific. They're not necessarily thinking about you because, you're a luminary in this field. They're thinking about you because there's a job that needs to be done and they, think that you might have the bandwidth to do it. And I think in those cases, one other thing that you could add to your response would be, one of the reasons that you're not doing it is because you're trying to focus your career more on X, and if there's X is something different than what they're asking you, you can do that in a respectful way that might also plant the seed in their mind that when something pertaining to X comes up, they should ask you again. And that might help you not feel as guilty about saying no. And it might also actually help create more opportunities for you down the line.
One of the other things that I think I learned in a leadership course that has helped me is also to help faculty have those conversations with their chiefs to say, you've asked me to sit on 2 or 3 committees in the last year. Can we talk about priorities for my career within the division? Because, and I'm guilty of this too, I have people in my group that I know are going to say yes when I need help. And it's lovely to have people in your division that are the true yes people who are great committee members and jump in. But it's also okay to be called out, to say, you keep going to me, maybe I get a break and somebody else should be the person you're going to. And I think that that's something new faculty can proactively do with their chiefs to say, I want to be a good citizen. I care about the division or the department, but can we talk about, a design for what work I might contribute to the division over the next few years so that we keep it focused, so that I don't end up on too many committees or too many tasks or too many epic smart form design teams, which I agree take a lot of time. But at the same point, very upfront saying, I want to be a great citizen. I'm keen to participate, but can we frame it? And I think that might achieve that goal for new faculty in a good way.
So you've both alluded to the idea that new faculty who are just getting started, trying to be good citizens, might feel that saying no will lead them to being viewed in a negative light professionally, and that may lead them to say yes to things that they otherwise should not or don't have the bandwidth for, leading to burnout. Has that been a concern for you in the past? And do you have any tips other than what we've already talked about regarding that, Brenda?
So that is a concern, and it's a concern on different ways. So if you're part of a team and a community of colleagues, and so depending on what it is you're saying yes or no to, it's not a bad thing to pause and think about the impact of your yes or no on your colleagues. So for example, in the pandemic, I really saw this come to the forefront with people who were always the yes people when somebody called out or we had an urgent need to fill somebody's having to step out, etc. And I had others that were not stepping up to do that. And that we dealt with very quickly in a very proactive and helpful way. But that had the potential to really reduce team morale and the sense of we're here together. So I think in certain circumstances, when it's an urgent issue, pausing and saying, am I being a good team player here? Can I be part of this community, and how, is pivotal. And so I do think it matters the context, and making sure that you think about the impact of that no on others around you, both in it's their turn and it's a great opportunity for them, positive way. And if I don't do this, who is it falling to? And have I actually been a good citizen in the last 6 months, or is this my turn?
So it's interesting to hear the leadership perspective too, because I have a leadership role, but not one that is as much overseeing faculty members. Because I think my impression has always been that the downsides of saying no to things are sort of more in my own mind or more in our own minds than they are in reality. I mean, if I ask someone to help with something and they say no, I usually have forgotten about it and moved on in 5 minutes. And so I think that it might not be as big of a deal unless it's something that is such a consistent pattern that it becomes noticeable. I mean, and Brenda alluded to this before too, which is, I think one of the other problems with saying no isn't just the appearance of bad citizenship, but it sort of decreases your, I don't know if you've heard this term before, luck surface area. So much of what we do and the opportunities that come to us in life depend on luck, but most of it isn't blind luck. A lot of it is luck that comes from being in the right place at the right time. And so the more places you are in, the greater your luck surface area, the more opportunities are likely to just randomly land in your lap. And so saying yes to things that put you in more places physically or around more people are going to increase that luck surface area and lead to more maybe opportunities that really are helpful or things that you're interested in later. So I would say that's, in my mind, when I look back at things that I wish I had said yes to instead of no, it's often those types of opportunities, and not for the reasons that I thought I was saying no. But of course, as you were saying, Brenda, saying yes is too much is a concern too. I mean, I have colleagues that say yes to everything, and there's two people I can think of in particular, and one of them is always completely overwhelmed with clinical responsibilities, and one of them is always completely overwhelmed with administrative responsibilities, and neither of those are necessarily meeting an optimal combination of job satisfaction and meeting their career goals.
Do you think that saying no, it might be construed differently depending on a person's gender or status as an underrepresented in medicine individual? I'm sure that's a concern for a lot of our listeners. How might you advise people who are concerned about being particularly negatively viewed in this light? Brenda, you want to take this one?
I think the concept of a, quote, diversity tax, which I've heard that phrase used by members that lead diversity work groups, where individuals are asked to be on every committee, search committee, et cetera, can be a real problem for people. And I think, as we hopefully will increase equity and diversity and opportunity as a field, this will become less of a reality, but it remains a reality. And I think we all need to be mindful that we don't keep asking the same people to do every job that relates to work in the diversity and equity domain. With respect to, I work in a pediatric field, as we all do, and so we are now almost 75-80% women. But it wasn't like that when I started. So when I first became faculty, I was one of a very handful of women in my group, and certainly in most international committees or meetings, I was one of very few women. And so I've seen both. I've seen the, difference in how men and women previously, I think, more than now in child neurology, I hope, were treated in being selected for really good opportunities versus not as good opportunities. I sincerely hope that pendulum is now equalized, but it is always worth making sure that, if there's a great opportunity being presented to someone, is that equally being presented to men and women, people of underrepresented representation in medicine, et cetera, or is that disproportionately going to one group or another? And I think that's a really important metric to always keep at the forefront.
Zach, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because I think when people say no, it's usually because either they're too busy, they aren't interested, or because they really sort of don't confidently feel that they can do the job well. And I actually was thinking about this a little when I was listening to your podcast on imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. And part of that discussion was that, women and minorities have this imposter phenomenon more for various reasons, which is mostly societal and really outside of their control most of the time. And I don't know if this is true, but I could imagine an uglier manifestation of this could be that when someone in one of those groups says no, it may be construed that it is because they lack confidence. And I guess maybe one way around that is to just be forthright. When we're talking about making excuses, I think, saying I'm too busy or I think this doesn't meet my career goals, I think is important then to include in your declining, because perhaps it would help sort of, quash those biases that it might be because of a lack of confidence.
How has saying no contributed to your success in your career? Zach?
Well, I mean, we only have so many hours in the day, so there's an opportunity cost to everything. And I think in a general sense, saying no has allowed me to work on things that I really enjoy more and that make me happy and help further my career. So I think just, freeing up more time to do the things that you love.
And what about you, Brenda?
Very much the same. I think saying no to things that, as Zach put it, aren't things I enjoyed, weren't going to advance my career, and were not going to be easy, allowed me to spend the time I needed to do on whether that was research, clinical, or leadership that I did enjoy, did advance my career, and was both hard and easy. I think the roadmap to a happy, fulfilling, successful career isn't straight. It's meant to be a little bit twisted around. And I hope people take paths not taken and divert from where they thought they were going to go every once in a while, because that can be the most amazing journey. But at the same point, that journey still needs to be forward and forward looking. And I think where I've said no to things that would have pushed me in directions that weren't on that career journey, I have been really glad I said no.
Is this something you are still working on, Brenda?
My family would tell you that I'd better say yes to that. I don't want to pretend to be better at something than I am. I am dismal at saying no, because I have the incredible good fortune to get a lot of great things that I have the opportunity to be part of. I'm also not very good at saying no if I feel that I think I'm very conscious of how my yeses and nos impact my team, right? I lead a very large team. And so I say yes to things that I know other leaders don't. And I do that very deliberately. I make that choice and I don't complain about it, but it has an impact because I like to lead by saying, I'm not going to ask you to do something I haven't done. And so people outside would tell me that that's something I need to be better at saying no to because it takes a lot of my time. But at the same point, doing something hard sometimes is what you find most rewarding. So I'm not very good at saying no, but at the same point, I'm also very happy. I don't feel burned out. I'm energized when I go to work. I love what I do. And I feel like my family and I have a balanced and happy life. So even though it's busy, I don't feel like I've said yes to more than I want to say yes to.
Zach?
Yeah, for sure. And, Brenda used a term before that I really liked. I don't want to misquote you, but I think you said something about intermittent personal reappraisal, right? And I don't think I'd heard those three words together, but that resonates with me because it's mostly about, what I enjoy has changed. And in a very major way, what I view as furthering my career has changed. And this is, one of the things about sort of like being farther along in your career is now that I've reached what one of my colleagues calls, your terminal promotion of being a professor. The definition of career success is not as much or maybe not at all hinged on external metrics, right? I mean, and it's a real privilege. And I would say, if you're in academics, one of the reasons to kind of push towards the promotion pathway is because eventually you get to a point where it gives you the freedom to just not give a damn about certain things. And that is a wonderful privilege, and one that I have definitely taken advantage of in the last few years. I have to say, one of the things that really increases your luck surface area in academics involves travel, like physically getting out of your silo and going to places. And it's something I enjoy, but I also have a family at home. I've got high school age kids now, and I don't have them at home for that much longer. And so I really committed once I reached my terminal promotion to actually minimize the amount of external travel I'm doing, or at least set limits for it. And for the first time in the last couple of years, I've actually been turning down, like grand rounds invitations at institutions. It's something I would have dreamed of doing a few years ago, but I think it's something that is important to me. So yes, I have changed in terms of what I say no to.
You're really hitting home on the point that it's always important to reassess because our priorities change over time and our goals change over time. And if you start out with one idea of what to say yes and no to and never change it, then you're probably not doing yourself any favors.
Absolutely.
Any last minute tips or words of wisdom, Zach?
I mean, you got to practice anything to be good at it. So stand in front of the mirror and just be like, no thanks, no ma'am, forget it, not today, Satan. Whatever it is you have to say, shake your head vigorously and say, I'll get back to you, in 24 hours. But I mean, again, it's a skill that actually requires some emotional investment. So practice it.
Brenda?
I would definitely the mirror thing. But the other great exercise is to find someone you admire that you think has a great career balance, that you respect, you like the way that they lead, and who you sincerely believe are happy in what they do. And then sit down with them and say, here are 5 things or whatever it is on your plate that I've been asked to consider. Here's what I currently do. Can we roadmap my career together out loud? Talk to somebody out loud. Because when you do that, sometimes it sounds ridiculous. then they'll say, well, how can you possibly say yes to this, this, and this, and this? And that, to me, I've done that many times. And often with somebody who knows nothing about my day life, but just sounding board. Here are all the things I think I'm supposed to be doing. What do you think? Is really helpful. So take that opportunity. I think, it will help center you. And sometimes you'll realize, oh, wow, actually, this isn't doable, or this is great. Everything's lining up and I love where I'm going.
Thank you both for saying yes to this podcast. I do appreciate it, even if it may not advance your careers in your terminal stages, as Zach put it. But thank you for saying yes to this. I appreciate your time.
Well, it was fun and it was easy. So check 2 of the 3 boxes anyway.
I agree.
Thanks so much, Sara.
Thank you, Sara.
Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast was created and produced by myself, Sara Schaefer. This podcast is not recorded as an official podcast of any institution or organization. The podcast is unfunded. Opinions are those of the individual participants. Music by Audrey Nath, artwork by Shivani Ghoshal. Want more content like this? Be sure to subscribe to the Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast wherever you get your podcasts to hear more about constructing your career in neurology. Follow us on Twitter at NeuroBolts and on Facebook at Neurology Nuts and Bolts to stay up to date on new content and give us feedback on what you want to hear. And tell your friends. Thanks for joining us.